this is the bill pay page. And the first thing that you'll notice is there's a few different ways to pay a bill on Ramp. So one way, and that's what you can see here, you can just upload your invoice this way. You can drag and drop it in. So you can, if you have the invoice, you can just drag and drop it in. That's one way. You can also forward your invoice to a Ramp AP email. So right here where it says copy email, I'm just going to hover over that and I'll show you the email address that it is. So if you came to community onboarding the platform overview session, you would have heard me say this, but this is a fake account. So it's a demo account. My company is fake. All my coworkers in here are fake. All of my transactions are fake. So this email looks a little bit ridiculous, but it is like the fake AP email account. Yours would probably be a little bit simpler, but this is where in your account, once you get this set up, you can just copy the AP email address to make it a little bit easier for yourself. But like I said, you can drag and drop the invoice in that way or copy the AP email address that way. Great. So those are the two ways. We'll get into it a bit more. Other things that we'll go over, we'll talk about how to add a vendor to bill pay. So new vendors and existing vendors, and then also we'll go through the whole process of paying a bill. And so over here on the left within the bill pay tab, so if you're looking on your settings and you're trying to follow along, I'm in bill pay, and right now I'm in drafts because that's like the first step. That's where you get everything started, where you draft your bills. But then we'll go through these different steps until it reaches paid, and that is the life cycle, the process of paying a bill on Ramp. Okay, great. So now we're going to click these three little dots right here in the top right, and then we're going to click settings. Okay, so the first part of settings is this general tab, and this is where we're going to make sure that our ACH account is correct and that's set up, because this will be the source account that all of your bills will be paid from. So this is the account that you use to make all of your payments. So very important that it's correct and that it's all good to go. I'll select this checking account. Again, I have it written as name and 1234 because when I set up my accounting, I use those fake names and numbers. You'll of course use your real account name and your real account ID, but for these purposes, since it's a fake company, it doesn't really matter. If you need to, I'll just hit save changes. If you need to use a different account, you'll just click this verify it first, just to make sure that everything is secure and verified before linking anything, because we just want to make sure that all of your money and transactions and payments are safe and secure. I'm going to quickly look at the chat, just making sure that, okay. Sometimes my account is slightly different from yours. So if you don't see general, that's fine. And that means you likely already set up your account, but we can go through that at the end to make sure that you have everything formatted correctly. But the main ones that we'll need are people and approvals and email forwarding. So we'll get to those right now. But if at the end, we can go over that to make sure as well. Okay, great. So now I'm going to go into people, the next tab right here. And so this is where you'll set up your AP clerk. So as a default, admins and owners will have full access to this bill pay page. They'll be able to create bills, schedule them. They can do anything in bill pay. So they're kind of like your AP clerks, just as a default, the admins and owners. But this is where you can select additional people from your team to be AP clerks as well. So maybe you have someone on your finance team or just someone else that pays the bills, whoever it may be, that you would want to add as the AP clerk, you can add them here. So you would just select them from all of your employees. So these are all my people. So if I wanted to say, maybe I'll add John, he's my bookkeeper. Maybe he helps pay some of the bills at my company or whatever it may be. So maybe I'll add him, and great. Now he has that access and that ability to view and create and edit and then initiate the approval process for all of the bills. but your admins and owners will still have to release the payments. Another note, if you're working with an external AP clerk, so you would invite them within the people page as well. They are able to interact with this page. They can view, create, edit, and initiate the approval processes of bills. So same as all of that says right there. But if they're external, they also cannot release the funds. So they're able to interact with this page, basically get everything ready to go, but just for like full security of your account and just making sure that everything's safe, owners and admins will have to release those funds or release those payments. Awesome. So now we'll go to the next little tab or button that is approvals. Give it a second. Okay, so in this settings tab of approvals, you can configure your approval workflows straight from this section. So again, admins and owners must be required. They must be as required approvers for any bill payment. So you could leave it as just the admin or owner is the approver, or you could add additional people. Maybe it's the manager, maybe it's the vendor owner or the vendor owner's manager. Whoever it may be, maybe you have these additional layers, but an admin or owner will always be a required approver for any bill payment. And that's, again, just to protect your account and make sure everything is secure, and funds will not be released from your account until the admin or owner has approved the payment. And a best practice that we recommend from the RAMP team is adding the vendor owner into a step of an approval layer. So basically the vendor owner, which we'll get to this in a little bit more as well when we set up a new vendor within our example, but that is the person internally from your team who manages the vendor relationship. So maybe I work with the company. If I'm the vendor owner, maybe I'm the one who always emails and calls the vendor and makes sure our subscription or whatever it may be is good to go. Maybe, I coordinate like the amount or whatever it is that we need. And so if I'm the vendor owner, it's a best practice to add me as a step to make sure that I'm approving it as well. So just everything is like safe, secure, and good to go. But the reason we recommend that, just so everyone's aware, is that it's to filter out any filter out legitimate invoices, like the correct ones, from any potentially scammer ones or hacker submitted invoices. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you, but just another layer of protection and just making sure you have full transparency into your account. So I'm going to click into this little workflow button right here. So this pencil and paper, which means edit. And so once I'm in here, I can change this workflow to add any approvers or notify people as well. So let's say if the amount, I'm just going to make up an example. Let's say if the amount is greater than or equal to $1,000. So if the bill is higher than $1,000, I'll hit save. Right now I have it set where it requires any admin, but if I want to add a step, I could say, let's say we also require the approval of, so any admin or that vendor owner that I just explained. So that internal teammate who manages that relationship with the vendor. Let's say that I also require that approval. And then maybe I'll just notify, the vendor owner manager. So maybe I'll just notify the manager of that person who owns the relationship with the vendor. So they're just, looped into all these bills. They know that the person they are overseeing is, doing great work and the bills are being paid and that relationship is continuing to flourish. So we could hit save, and then I can continue adding these steps for however many I need to, or if I no longer want that step, I can remove it. So this is all very editable, and you can continue changing this based on however you would like your workflow to be. Great. So I'll hit save workflow. Wonderful. And then the last tab right here is this email forwarding tab. And so when I explained earlier that there's two ways to pay a bill, just dragging and dropping the invoice into this page right here, or copying that email, you can just see that email right here. So this is just this email forwarding tab of the settings is another place to see where that AP email address is. And so I can just copy the email address from there instead of that main page. And once you start having your bills drafted, this is where you would grab it, because you'll see in a sec, but the bills will start popping up in this drafts page. Okay, great. So we will go out of that really quick. And so, like I said at the beginning, there are 4 different sections that the bill will live while it goes through the bill pay process. So drafts, this is where we are right now. This is where unscheduled and unapproved invoices will live. And so whatever's here is ready for you to take action and then ultimately schedule your bills. So you might need to add the vendor information if it's a new vendor that Ramp doesn't recognize, or maybe you just need to schedule it or select the form of payment. Maybe you're doing ACH or adding a virtual card. We'll get to all of that in a second, but this is where they live. And again, the 2 ways to import them are dragging and dropping or forwarding to that AP email address. And then once they go through drafts, and again, I'm just showing you this right now, but I'll show it with an actual example in a second. They'll go to the For Approval tab. And so, of course, nothing is here yet because we haven't made one together yet. But this is where scheduled invoices, so you draft them and then you schedule them and they go to approvals. This is where they go. And so scheduled invoices that require the approvals from either the admin or owner or those additional managers or additional vendor owners, whoever it is, this is where they live. And so they will not be sent to the next step, this payment step, until they have been approved by all designated parties. So again, you determine and decide who needs to be the approvals and the approvers, but they will not go to the payments tab until they have been approved. And then once they're approved, they'll go to this For Payment tab. Again, nothing's here yet. We'll get to that. And this is where bills live that have been scheduled, received all approvals, and then now they're just waiting to be paid. So depending on the payment method, they might sit here for a few days or a little bit. It just depends on when you schedule them and the payment method. So we'll get to all of that, but this is where they live. And then lastly, once they have been paid, they will sit in this Paid tab. And this is always available for you to reference. It's basically a history log of all of your paid bills. So once they're paid, they live in this Paid tab and it serves as your bill payment history. Okay, great. So now we're going to go through how to add a vendor, and then we'll go through this process of paying a bill together as well. So again, as I've explained, it is a demo account. So sometimes it's a little finicky with their own sample invoice. I'm going to try this first. If the dates or something don't align, I'll upload a different one, but we'll try the sample one first. It should work. It usually does, but just in case. Okay. So like I said, this is the Drafts tab. Pretend I either just dropped this invoice in, or maybe I forwarded it to my AP email account and then it appeared here. But either way, it's now in my Drafts tab. And so you can see it pulled in some of that information, the amount, the due date, the invoice date. So based on that, those dates are in the future, it should be good. But we'll see. Sometimes it doesn't let me do it, so I might have to pull in my own. And this is a neat feature to be aware of as well, but you can look at the invoice. So we'll look at it in a second when we hit review. But just for your reference, it's nice to know that the invoice is right here, and you can always refer back to it. So now we'll hit review. And so this is a new bill, and it's also a new vendor. So right here it says, this looks like a new vendor to us, which means we'll have to add them. So how do you add a vendor? We'll hit add to Ramp. And so this is the vendor that has been pulled from the invoice. And then when you're adding a new vendor, you'll just have to go through this information. So we'll go through it together right now. That's the vendor, Sassy SaaS Vendor Inc. And then the country and state. And then this is very important, but the vendor owner. So again, that's that person from your team, so they work at your company, that manages the relationship with the vendor. So they own the vendor. they own the relationship. So that's where I would add that contact right there. And then the vendor contact, this is where I would add them as well. So if you can't pull like it exactly from the invoice, that's okay, because likely you'll know who you communicate with at that vendor anyway. But for this, we'll just say John and then Smith as well, just to make it easy. And if you take one thing away from this, it's that the vendor contact email is so important. So if for some reason you didn't have the first and last name, it's not the end of the world. It's like, if you have them, please enter them. But the email is the most important piece of this information, because that's where all of the information will be sent. So that's where they'll be notified that the bill payment has been scheduled, and then where it has been paid, or if we're sending them a virtual card or anything like that, it will be going to that email address. So vendor email, so important. We'll add this here. So we'll just say John at, we'll just go test.com and see if that works, because again, it's fake. And then we'll just skip that phone number for right now. And then, okay, we have the vendor, we have the vendor type, the country, the state, the vendor owner, so my internal teammate that owns the relationship with this vendor. And then the vendor contact, again, the first and last name. It's not like imperative that you have that. Great that we do. But the email is required, so we have that. And then that phone number if we have that as well. And then we'll scroll down to the bottom, and we'll come back to payment details in a second. But we get questions about this a lot, like where do you add your tax information? So this is optional, but if you want to add this tax information, this is where you can do so. And then back to this payment details. So we'll get into this a bit more once we pay the bill, after we create the vendor. But you can either set this up now or when you're paying the bill. But there's a few different ways to pay your bills. One is ACH, so that is a wire payment that will arrive in a few days. So for right now, we'll just click that. We'll see if these numbers work. Great. Okay, and so then we should be able to create the vendor. Okay, so that is how you create the vendor. So now this is a new bill. So if I had worked with that vendor before, or Ramp recognized the vendor, I wouldn't have had to go through that process. But since Ramp had not recognized that vendor, I just created it. So again, I added the vendor information, I added my vendor owner for my company, and then I added the vendor contact information. So that required email and then that first and last name, and then selected a payment method for that vendor. However, once I'm paying the bill, I could use a different payment method if needed. But that was creating the vendor. So now I'm creating the bill. So we have the vendor information that we just made. And again, since it was new, we have no previous payments to that vendor, but we just made that vendor together. So now we're in the actual like bill payment information. So a lot of this Ramp will extract from the actual invoice, which is super helpful and saves a lot of time and hassle. So it has the invoice number, the invoice date, the bill due date. If you want to add a quick description, you can do that. It's optional, but a good way to just keep track of which payment it is or what it's for. And then if you're doing a PO, a purchase order, you would add that there. And then in this line item section, so you can either have everything as one grand total, or you can divide it out by the individual line items. So we'll just go ahead and divide this out together. So this first one is $800, and it's a fake bill, so it's just funny little things. So we'll just say, for our sake, we'll just do the same thing for each one, but we'll make sure that the amounts are correct. And then we will do this last one, so 900, and then we'll just say 3, and then advertising, Dumbo, and then one more of 1,000, 4. Okay, so that should add up to our total, which it does, of 3,420. If I had any more lines or wanted to break it down further, I could do so there as well. And then I'm in the payment details. So like I said, when I created that vendor, I selected ACH as my method of payment for that vendor. However, maybe I don't want to pay that way this time, or I selected that, but going forward, I want to do it differently. Or maybe there's not enough time for an ACH payment because this takes a few days and maybe it's, the day it's due or the day before it's due and I'm running out of time and I want to make sure it's paid on time. So I maybe would issue a virtual card instead so the vendor can use that card to pay it instantly, whatever the case may be. And then also, I'll get to this a bit later, but if it's a recurring bill, this is where you would select that if you know it's going to be something that you'll be continuously paying, like a recurring payment. So that's where you would select that. But great. So you'll just want to look, if you're doing ACH, you'd want to look and make sure that the arrival date, so again, it's 2 business days. If you need it same day delivery, double check that there's still enough time for this because based on the time of day, you just want to make sure that this will still get there, but it would just cost $10 for same day delivery. But this is where you can check when that ACH payment will arrive just to make sure that you're within when the bill is due. But great, let's say we're doing ACH. Okay. We would pay from that checking account that we set up at the beginning. Also, if you I know we had that question about that account, so I can show later. If you were unable to add that account in the beginning like I did, I can show later where you can help set up those accounts. So if you still have that question at the end, please save it for the end and we can go over that together. So this is who I'm sending the payment to. And then if I wanted to say like, October bill or whatever, just something, a quick memo, that's where I could add that. And so it's sent to the vendors to let them know what it's for. And then this is that approval setup that I created. So I said it requires any admin, and then it also requires James Smith, who is the vendor owner for my team. So I said that we needed that vendor owner approval, but that was optional. I didn't need to have that required step. That's just the best practice that we recommend at Ramp. But if you just wanted just any admin or the owner, you could do that. If you wanted that additional layer of maybe having the vendor owner manager review it or just be notified, you would see that here as well. Great. Now, if I didn't want to pay via ACH, I can click this drop down and look at the other payment options. So I could send in a check, and the way that checks work at Ramp is if you click check, it's not you getting out your checkbook and writing the check and sending it off. But basically, if you select check, the funds will be pulled from your account, and think of it as like the funds being pulled from your account and putting into Ramp's account. And then we'll write the check and mail it for you, but it will be coming from you. It will look like it's coming from you. So when the vendor receives the check, it looks like you sent it. It looks like it came from you, but really we'll be pulling the funds from your account, putting them into ours, and then we'll write that check for you, send it off, and it will arrive in 6 business days. Just important to note about checks is that it does take 6 business days. So if your bill is due the next day or within that week, you might not want to choose check because it will not get there in time. But you can see again when it would arrive. Okay, so I'm going to click this drop down again. So ACH, we've gone over that. Check, we've gone over that. The other way, I guess lastly, you don't have to pay with Ramp. You can just use Ramp to track and approve everything, but you could pay externally. You could pay your own checks or some other way if you wanted to do so. So ACH check, not paying with Ramp, and then just tracking it and approving it within Ramp. But that creates an extra step for you. So do recommend using one of these options. Or you can create a Ramp card. And this is a great way to take advantage of our cash back. You can select a one-time virtual card. And this is great if it's just a one-off payment or you don't anticipate this being a recurring payment. And I'll click on that to show you what it looks like. But once you use that one-time virtual card, Ramp will send that virtual card. So I'll show you this in a second when we hit continue, but Ramp will send that virtual card to the vendor, the contact at the vendor, and then they will use that card information to pay it, and then the card will be locked. So if it's a one-time card, it will be locked after the vendor uses it to make the payment. Or if you use an existing Ramp card, so if it's a recurring subscription or recurring payment, something that you know you're going to still be paying, this is like one of the best use cases for our virtual cards is vendor payments, the recurring ones, or a one-time card as well, because then you can just set up this card and it will be paid every month, or if you pay more often than a month, every week or something like that, and you'll just use that card each time. Great. So let's say it's a one-time virtual card for this payment. So again, just to go over what we've gone over, we created that vendor information together since it was a new vendor. And then at the bill level, we had the invoice number, the date, the bill due date, any other additional information. We broke out the bill by line items. Again, you could just do it into a single line item if you don't need to do this, but for this example, we broke it out into individual line items. And then we chose the payment details. So we could either do ACH payment, we could do a check, which we're sending on your behalf, but it comes from you, but you don't have to get out your checkbook and write it. Or you can use a one-time virtual card or an existing Ramp card. Great, so that's our approval process. That's who's going to be approving it. And then we'll hit continue. So this is your final step to review it. One last look. When I mentioned the virtual card, so we selected that one-time virtual card, this is what it looks like. So it has the name, it's invoice 501 from Sassy Sass vendor. It has that total, which is the total amount of the bill. So this is the card that they'll be used, and then until the bill is approved, so when it goes to that next step, after we draft it, so we're making it right now. We're in drafting. Once we schedule it, it will be sent to the approvers to approve it. And then once it's approved, that card will not be locked. The vendor will be able to use it. And you can see that right here in this little box that says, how does this work? Once it's approved, you'll be able to pay the bill using this card. Great. So we can hit create bill. So now that was in the drafts tab, and you remember seeing it for a few seconds there before we went into it, but it was drafted. Now, since I've scheduled it, it should be in the for approval tab. So I'm going to click on that, and there it is. It's now in the for approval tab. So as I can see, I have that vendor name, the amount, the category, all of that. And in red right here, it needs my approval. I have the dates as well. And again, I can reference that invoice right here as well. So I could click approve right here, or just to show you another place that these approvals pop up, I'm going to quickly leave bill pay, but come back to it. And I'm going to go to inbox. And then in your inbox, so again, on this left-hand tab, I clicked inbox. I'm going to click bills. And I can see it here. So if you have a ton of bills, if you're making a ton of bill payments, and maybe that page is kind of crowded with bills, or it's hard to see which ones you need to approve, or for whatever reason you'd rather work out of this inbox, this is a great option. So again, inbox, bills, and then this is the one that I just made that needs my approval. So we'll go back to bill pay to approve it, but this inbox bills is great to know. This is where the bills that you need to approve will live. So we'll go back to bill pay. We'll go back to for approval. So I'm going to click approve. Give it a second. Great. So it should be in the next tab of for payment. So we'll click on that. And it is. And you might think I'm surprised, but it's just nice when this works. So since it's a demo environment, but now it's in the for payment tab. So again, all that information is the same. And I can see that that method of payment that I chose is a one-time virtual card. When I click here, so this is a bit finicky, but when I click here and then go down, I can see the actual virtual card and its details. So when I click on it and flip it around, it reveals that 16-digit card number, that expiration date, that CVV, and then the card holder, the amount, all of that information is right here. The billing address, it's all right here. So again, just to show you how I got there, I clicked that little card icon and payment status. And then it brought me down to the payment details where I can see this virtual card, click on it, flip it around to reveal the card details. And this is also just nice to know that if you click anywhere into the bill, so I did click that card icon, but if you click anywhere into the bill, you'll have all the information pulled up. And while I'm in here, if I click activity, this is a really cool feature. You can leave a comment and mention others. So if I wanted to mention it to one of my teammates and say, you know, hey, Andrew, okay, well, not Andrew if he doesn't have access to the bill, but hey, James, I'm James, so that, you know, kind of doesn't make sense. But for this example, hey, James, like wanted you to have the heads up about this bill and the higher, you know, total than normal based on increased headcount or whatever it may be. Like whatever you would want to say, you can comment it here and James would be tagged once I comment that. So it's a good way to loop people into bill payments, ask questions. If something doesn't look right, you can, hey, James, wanted to make sure this looks correct. Whatever it may be, it will tag them there. So again, I just clicked anywhere on the bill and I went to activity, and that's where that little comment section is. Okay, great. So I will hit pay now, and then it's not actually going to pay yet because the vendor has to use that information. So it's all good to go. It's not going to move to paid today because I'm not the vendor. So I can't use that card information to pay the bill. But once it is used in 2025, so 2 years from now, because this date is 2 years away, it would move to paid and it would sit in that paid history for me to review. Awesome. And then another question, I know I saw, or another answer, I know I saw a question in the chat a little bit ago about fees. The only fee that would be a possibility of this page is an international wire fee of $20. So that's just something to be aware of, that if you are paying an international wire, it would be $20. Okay, great. And then just to reemphasize as well, when you're paying by check, you won't actually be getting out your checkbook, writing that check, you know, ripping it off and mailing it, but you'll select check, we'll withdraw the funds from your bank account and then put it in Ramp's account, and then we'll issue that check, but it will look like it's coming from you to your vendor. Okay, and then another thing, I did mention this, but just to reemphasize again, if you use a one-time virtual card, it will immediately expire once the card information is entered by the vendor. So 2 years from now in 2025, once this one-time virtual card is used to pay the vendor, which again, obviously you wouldn't be scheduling bills 2 years in advance. This is just like a weird example, but that card would expire once it's used, or automatically 60 days after it's created. So this example, pretend it's this year because it doesn't really make sense, but it's just the fake example that they give me, that Ramp, the platform, gives. Great. And then also, once you use that virtual card, it will be reflected in your team's ERP after syncing. So that's nice to be aware of as well. And then one other thing to point out about the recurring payment. So I mentioned that when we were looking at the paying the bill and the different ways to pay. But if it is a recurring payment, you can set that up. And once you click on that, you'll have to note the frequency that it's recurring. So the frequency and period. And a best practice here that we like to recommend or suggest is that setting the period to the contract period for the vendor. So if you're doing a recurring payment, you'll choose how frequently it recurs, and then you'll set that period to whatever you would like, but we suggest setting it to the contract period of the vendor. And then I think this is the last like little announcement-y thing, just or like common question that we get. But if any future payment, so if you set something as recurring and the future payment falls on a weekend or a holiday, it will be delivered on the previous business day. So let's say something was scheduled for the Saturday, it'll be delivered Friday, or paid Friday. Cool. And then I showed inbox, so I showed where to find those bills that you need to approve, but just one more time, we would click on inbox and then bills. I obviously don't have any at the minute because I only made that one and I already approved it, but this is where any bills that you need to approve would live. Okay, I'm going to look at the chat really quick because I know we have a lot of questions. So thank you for all of those, and June, thank you for all of the answers. Awesome. And then just to correct myself as well, I think I said the only time you'd be paying in bill pay is the international wires. But as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about ACH, if it is a same day ACH payment, like you're not scheduling it for a few days in advance, but you're scheduling it that same day, it would be $10. So those are the two reasons you'd be paying in bill pay. All right, just going to review these questions really quick. But if you don't have any questions and you